Hello and welcome back to another Gunpla review. Today we're taking a look at the AMS-123X-X Moon Gundam. The Moon Gundam is not actually a Gundam. I don't know how obvious that is given the obviously not Gundam aesthetic, but technically it's like 10% Gundam, as the head and the psycho plates that make up the crescent on the back are actually from the Psycho Gundam Mark IV, which was a Titan's prototype mobile suit. And apparently the psycho plates are supposed to be called G-doors, but that's dumb, so I'm going to be calling them psycho plates because it makes more sense. The main body of the Moon Gundam is from the Vargil. Vargil? Let's go with Vargil, which is a prototype of the sizable, and it's pretty obvious when you compare them. But enough about the lore, let's get into this kit. Starting, of course, as always, with the articulation. Now, starting with the articulation, I'm going to do something first, and that is take off the crescent, and we'll go over that in a minute. So let's just get that off frame and go over the main mobile suit itself. Starting with the head, it is on a ball joint and can get a full rotation. Though everything does kind of bang into each other a little bit, it can do the full rotation. It can look really, really far down and look pretty decently upwards as well. Now moving on to the shoulders, and they're actually quite impressive because they have a hinge upwards to this point, and then the rest of the arm is on a hinge as well, and this piece of armor here gets out of the way, and it can almost go all the way up. I don't know if it's just mine, but the front V-fin really likes to pop off. Let's just get that back on. There we go. It's not loose or anything, it's just can come off really easily. Also, this is also on a swivel, though you're not really going to get a ton of use out of it, just because of how the arm is set up. But it can tilt forward and backward a little bit. Honestly, just how bulky the shoulder is, you're not going to get a ton out of it anyway, but yeah, it's supposed to have a bit more just to get that little bit extra distance. But in practice, not super useful, unless I'm doing something wrong, in which case correct me. Anyway, like I said, hinge outwards on the arm. Also, there is a rotation at the upper arm, which makes me a little bit concerned about the elbow hinge, just because the parts are so thin, but just twist it up here instead of grabbing it down here and it should be fine. There is one bend at the elbow here, and then a second bend inside the lower arm. And the wrists, as always, are on a ball joint. Nothing in the upper chest. However, the lower chest is on a ball joint, which has a hinge inside that lets it go forward slightly more. Of course, that's not really the important one for going forward, because there's actually a hinge inside of here that's attached to the back skirt, which allows it to go really, really far forward. Like, that's a pretty big difference. Bring that back down. It doesn't really rotate around. I mean, you can get almost a full rotation if you sort of finagle it a bit, but just all the dips in this and on the back too, and also it does pop back skirt off. Get back on there. Yeah, you're not going to get a ton of movement out of the waist side to side. The front skirts are on ball joints, so you're not going to get a lot of wiggle out of them. Honestly, it's basically just forward and backwards. And also they do come connected, but it's actually shown in the instructions to cut them. And also the connection piece is actually way thinner than it usually is, so it's pretty much intended to be cut. The hip skirts don't get a ton of up and down, and they can only go up and down because the gray piece inside is where the clip is molded into. But it's enough to get out of the way to get the leg out. And as you saw, the back skirt is on a hinge, which is nice and also important since the 3mm port for stands is actually on the back instead of the bottom. Kind of feel like they could have just put two, but I mean, as long as it's there, can't complain, I suppose. Let's see if I can get this out of the way to show it off. The hips are on a hinge, so they can come down and forward to get a bit further up. Though you're not going to be getting a ton upwards anyway, just because of how low down this connects in. So even with this down, I mean, you're not getting any high kicks out of this thing. It's just about 90 degrees at the hip. Speaking of the knees. Uh-oh. It's not broken or anything. Though that does look like a stress mark. Uh-oh. On there, you. Yeah, do be careful with this. Some of the parts are really thin, and also it doesn't have any polycaps. It's all plastic, so yeah, things might get stressed. But anyway, jump cut. Sorry about that. Moving on to the knee, you get just under 90 degrees, and then you use the second joint, and you get slightly further. Then you use the other joint, and you get a very nice knee bend, which separates the knee armor out into two pieces, and exposes a bit more detail and the dumb marks that I didn't clean off very well, but well, we'll just not worry about that. Now, the verniers on the back of the leg can hinge out quite far, actually. You're probably not going to want to go more than that, but they can go almost 90 degrees. These additional verniers on the side of the leg can move out very slightly. Not entirely sure what the point of that is, but it is there. Move back around to the front. This ankle armor can move pretty far up. It can go slightly further than that, but it does start to pop off the clip. And really, the angle is kind of weird. It's not a ball joint, it's just a hinge and then another hinge that has two. You can tilt to the side and go forward and back, but it can't actually swivel. Which I thought was going to annoy me, but it actually doesn't really make any difference, mostly because it's pretty much in flight poses all the time, but also because you kind of wouldn't want the toe to not line up with the ankle armor anyway. And because of the swivel up at the thigh, I mean, you can still get a splayed stance. So it doesn't have an ankle swivel, but it doesn't really matter. Now, as sort of a midpoint between articulation and accessories, let's get into the crescent, which does technically have articulation. If you pull out the joints slightly, they can hinge, which means you can curve the shaping, which is definitely actually surprisingly useful. You wouldn't think so, but getting certain poses to look natural, having this curved, really helps. Though I will say that you can definitely see all the dumb marks, and that's not my fault, because I tried my best in order to get these off without a single mark. And yeah, no, this plastic is an absolute nightmare. This sort of slightly candied translucent red is an absolute nightmare for getting these. You'll see that the nub marks are really well hidden on this kit. And I know I've made some mistakes in the past, but even then, this all the other plastic is really, really easy to clean up. But for some reason, this translucent plastic is just the worst. Now, these can all separate out as well, starting by splitting it in half and folding these in. These can all separate, but also there's tabs and slots, or slots and tabs, and it can be sandwiched together. You line it up. And then this can be put on just on one side. As sort of a new Gundam fin funnel look. Personally, I prefer the full crescent. But then also, all of these can be separated out, and these can actually be folded away to get out of the way as well. I don't really need to separate all these apart, do I? Also, they all have the same connector that the centerpieces have, and that's so that they can snap together in a line. Funny how this doesn't take advantage of that. Interesting how the Psycho Gundam Mark IV has double these and forms a full circle instead of a crescent. I wonder if that's something on the horizon. I mean, they already remolded the Moon Gundam as the Vargil for a P-band eye, so yeah. Future-proofing. Then again, we've gotten plenty of molds like the Momo Kapul, and we never ended up getting the proper Kapul for that, so hey, maybe it won't come. Also, related to the Psycho Plates, you get 3 different arms to attach on. These two are the same. They're posable. They have a hinge at the base, and then a second one in the middle, and then a third one for the attachment. They also have notches that go into these so that it can't rotate freely, which is a nice touch. They can be folded up and just attached onto the back. And also you get this one, which is a solid piece and is hollow on this side. And you might be wondering, well, what's the difference? Well, if you look at it, the proportions are different. And if you look at it further, you'll notice that the peg is on an angle. And this is purely to pull off this pose that's on the box art and is way too close, but to get it right there. But we'll leave that there because there's something else. You get 2 extra clips, and I don't know why. Maybe they assumed these would break and you could replace them. I'm kind of assuming that that was the idea, considering it's translucent plastic. I mean, they're there. I didn't forget any pieces, by the way. This is how it's just leftover parts. And also you get the action base adapter, which plugs into the back to put the peg towards the bottom. Don't really know why they didn't just put a peg hole at the bottom, but I mean, they included this, so I suppose you can't really complain, except that this is actually a pain to get off, so yeah. Also, don't worry, we'll get into the rest of the accessories in a bit. You get 2 H-Runner. One in a solid green, one in a clear. I obviously went with the green one. But you do have the option if you want to go with clear. Now, as I said, this doesn't have any polycaps, but it also doesn't have any stickers, though that doesn't mean you don't have to color correct some things. The red on the ankles, as well as up on the rear V-fin, was painted, as well as the black, zoom in, focus, black that's around the eyes had to be painted. And also the top two stripes on the head are supposed to be green, but I don't have any way to correct that at the moment, so forgive me. Now, finally moving on to the rest of the accessories. You get two open hands. It's great, considering how expensive this is, that they would give you open hand options. And then I bring this back in, and you begin to notice something. This pose has open hands. Actually, you might be able to see it there on the side. They included these open hands for one pose. I'm thankful that they're included, but I am annoyed of the reason for them being included. There are so many other high grades that should have at least one open bomb, and they don't even bother. In fact, they don't even bother with anything other than holding hands. I can understand not giving closed fists, because holding hands look almost the same and you can get away with it, but... it's just stupid. It's just dumb. Anyway, moving on. You get a beam rifle and a specific trigger finger hand, which is always nice. There's no peg, so it's a little bit wobbly, but it's not too bad. No sticker or anything, but that's because it doesn't have a camera. And as far as I'm aware, it is color accurate. It's just supposed to be gray. I did a little bit of panel lining to make it a little bit nicer, but I mean, just kind of a blocky gray. Nothing. Don't get me wrong, though. I actually quite like this beam rifle. I like the blocky look. I like how it's mostly just gray. It looks nice to me. Anyway, for the next one, we have to bring in the Moon Gundam and pull this off the back. And then bring in this effect part, which is slightly bent. And that's from the packaging. Not my fault. Normally you can get away with it with a beam saber since they're round and you can just have it slightly bent. But for this, yeah. But, that said, the effect part is very nice. It looks great. Fits. This should probably be like a millimeter further in, but whatever. And it is a beam tomahawk. Or beam saber. Or sword tomahawk. It depends on the form. This is the sword tomahawk form, I think. It's just a beam tomahawk anyway. Whether or not it has this spike at the end. But in order to get this into the hand, this is actually slightly too thick. You do have to separate the back of the hand off in order to slide it in. So let's get that. Into the hand, and you'll notice something slightly annoying. The blocky piece on the back of the arm, if you turn it over to the side, it can angle down. If you have it straight, it cannot. That bothers me. Whether or not it bothers you, Speaking of the arm, each arm has one of these in the back. And I assume I have them the right way around, but I suppose it doesn't really matter. But it's slightly annoying to get them out. So, give me a moment. There we go. Now these can be left in the arm, but I'm not going to bother. Anyway, these small beam effects just slide in. And yeah, this can be left in the arm as just spikes sticking out of the back, but it can also be turned into a beam boomerang. Now this is called the butterfly edge at some point. Whether it's when it's a boomerang or when it's in the arm, I don't know, but it's actually quite a nice piece. I like the effect parts, and I do like beam boomerangs. So, actually let's stick this in the arm now. You can see it looks okay. Honestly, it looks kind of silly, but yeah, just slides in and out. And while I have this out, the final accessory. We finally got to it. This was a very, very long segment, but there's a lot of stuff to talk about, so this little square piece, don't mind that. I'm not planning on using these, so I didn't really care about cleaning it up too much. This pegs into the back of the arm with the peg hole there. This way, yeah, this way, towards the front. Then you take 2 of the pieces of psychoplate, peg it in, and it makes a shield. A very, very ugly shield. You can do this. I'm never going to, but the option's there, so. Also, if you think I forgot something, the action base, I didn't. That's going to be next Wednesday's review. I think it's probably better if I make that its own separate review rather than just lumping it in with this, especially since this video is long enough as it is. Now, finally, getting into size comparisons, and it's a couple heads taller than the average high grade. It's not as big as the Cubelay, and it's certainly not as big as the Sazabi, but still quite sizable. The Crescent definitely adds a lot to the overall imposing figure of it. So, in conclusion, the Moon Gundam is very good. The articulation is excellent. The plastic quality is really nice, by the way. The fact that it doesn't have any stickers is impressive. However, the price point is a little bit on the ridiculous side. In fact, if I hadn't gotten mine with a 15% off sale, I would not have bought it, because this thing is 45 Canadian pesos. This is an expensive kit, and I mean, yeah, they charge $10 for action bases, so you take that off, it's still $35. The Cubelay is less than $30 in Canada, and the Cubelay is a lot bigger. I mean, it doesn't have a stand, but just the overall mass is a lot bigger, and this doesn't quite feel worth the price. That said, if you can get it on sale and you can get it for a decent price, I can recommend getting the kit if you like it. It is a very good kit. It's just expensive. Anyway, that's been it for this review. Be sure to let me know what you think down in the comments. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for future reviews. Also watch my backlog. Given current events, I'm not sure when I'm going to be able to order more kits, so definitely watch my backlog. And as always, until next time, happy building.